Discipleship on the Edge, Part 7. And today I want to start off by saying that as we journey on from here in the series, I want to give real credit to Darrell Johnson and his book called Discipleship on the Edge, because this is where I really start to track with what he is expounded in his book on the book of Revelation. And so we're going to look at Revelation chapter 1 in a few verses, but it's that beautiful experience where John is in the Spirit and he's praying and he hears a voice behind him and he turns to see the voice. What a catch of phrase. He doesn't turn to see the person, he turns to see the voice. But according to Johnson, he says, perhaps no other book in the Bible presents us with the fundamental issue of discipleship and therefore the fundamental issue of life as sharply as the book of Revelation. Now, for most people who read the book of Revelation, they don't see the discipleship and the practical reality of how to live life today. They see the end. He says, no, this book was written for us to live life today. And it's about discipleship that this book was written. Someone has said that we as human beings are incurably religious. Meaning, we cannot but worship someone or something. Who will it be? What will it be? Human beings are incurable. There's this thing inside of us that looks for something greater than who we are, because we know how frail and weak we are. But sometimes we don't believe in a spiritual reality out there, so we find something else that catches our attention, that we can pour our energy into, our focus, our dreams. But everybody is worshiping something or someone. It's just, what is it? And a fundamental issue of today, as well as a fundamental issue of the times in which John wrote this, is whom will we worship? What will we worship as human beings? Is it the powers of the present day or Jesus Christ? To whom will we give our ultimate allegiance? Is it to ourselves that we give our ultimate allegiance? Gosh, we presume too much of ourselves. But who is the focus of our attention? Who is the focus of our thoughts, of our dreams, of our time, of our wealth, of our pursuit? What do we worship? In the imagery of the book of Revelation, do we give worship to the slaughtered lamb, the lamb who was slain with his offer of life, who says, come follow me, but die to yourself first? Or, in the language of Revelation, is it to the beast with its seductive offer of pleasure and wealth and power, the dark trifecta, who says, come and live for yourself? The two are starkly contrasted. Whom will we follow as we make our way through this world? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. By whose value system will we walk? Babylon, the harlot, or the New Jerusalem, the bride? The imagery of this book. What will shape my lifestyle? The kingdom of God in Jesus Christ, or humanity in rebellion against God? What shapes how I live? This was written at a time of great hostility to Jesus' followers. When John was writing this, Domitius was the Caesar. He had elevated himself as God, had wanted people to worship him as God, and he was slaughtering Christians. But he feared slaughtering John because of the popularity of John and the backlash it would bring. And so he exiled John to the island of Patmos to write this. But friends, in a time where there was such grave danger for believers, the greatest danger was not the persecution itself, and it never really is, but rather spiritual complacency. Even when there is hardship and persecution, you find it's not the greatest danger. It's spiritual complacency. It's passivity around Jesus Christ. Passivity around the Holy Spirit. Passivity and, I don't know so much. It's just what it is. That's the danger. And today, that's still the greatest danger. You will find in countries where there's great persecution, a thriving church. But you will find in countries where it's so easy, a complacent church. What's the greatest danger? This book was written not so much to say, hey, stand strong in the persecution, because we do. But yes, it does apply. But more to say, be careful of complacency. Be careful. Church, be careful. The last book of the Bible calls us to a radical discipleship, to an all-out courageous loyalty to the Lamb in a world that's feverishly worshiping the beast, which is essentially a modern-day worldly system that is antichrist. That's all it is. But imagery, and this book's full of imagery. Imagery has the power to go deeper than mere words. And that's why this book is written. Friends, that's the power of visual advertisement. It has the power to go deeper than mere words. So the book of Revelation encapsulates and embodies these incredible images that helps us to get the message deep inside our hearts. So let's look at Revelations 1, verses 12 to 16. Then I turned. Remember, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's Day, and I heard a voice. And then I turned to see the voice that was speaking to me. And on turning, I saw 7 golden lampstands. And in the midst of the lampstands, one like a son of man, clothed with a long robe and with a golden sash around his chest. The voice was behind him. The voice was not inside of him. This was not an inner moment John was having with God. This was a voice that spoke, and he heard, and he turned, and he looked. This was a powerful spirit moment that actually worked out in reality. And later he says, I felt his right hand touch me. That's how real this encounter was. But he sees, before the voice, as he turns, he sees 7 golden lampstands, and one like the Son of Man. He later, in this encounter, hears the words from the Son of Man explain what the 7 golden lampstands are. Do you want to know what the 7 golden lampstands are? They are the 7 churches. That's all they are. The 7 churches that John was pastoring, that he was apostolic in his heart towards, the churches he carried here, he sees the 7 churches. They're the golden lampstands, and we'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment. But in the middle of the lampstands, I want to say this, in the middle of the lampstands, in other words, in the middle of the churches, is one like the Son of Man. He's not above, looking down at the lampstands. He's in the middle of the lampstands. He's not outside, looking in. He is in the midst of the lampstands. Jesus Christ is in the midst, in the middle of his church. Yeah. He carries his church with the deepest passion and compassion. He is never far away from his church, no matter what's going on. When he had this revelation, he saw one like the Son of Man, who we'll talk about now, standing in the midst of the lampstands. I want to remind you of this. There's only one thing, not two, not three, not four, not one thing that Jesus said, I will build on planet Earth. And that's his church. Do not have small regard for the church. Even when she fails, do not disregard her, because Jesus thinks incredibly highly of his church. He is found in the midst of his church. No matter the hardship, no matter the pain, no matter the disappointment, he will never be separated from his church. The church is his bride that he is preparing to be without spot and blemish, for whom he will return one day, and there will be the marriage feast of the Lamb, and there will be this great celebration in the new heavens and the new earth. The church. That is why we gather, because we are his church. Whether it's a church of 10 people in a home somewhere, whether it's a church of 30, whether it's a small church of 70 to 100 people, whether it's a medium-sized church like Immanuel, whether it's a large church like Grace, whether it's a mega church like CRC or of 10,000 or 5, it makes no difference. Jesus is in the midst of where his people gather around him, where they seek to be encouraged in him, where they seek to encourage one another in their faith, where they seek to worship him, where they seek to be shaped by the gospel, the good news of God in Christ, where they seek to be equipped to be saints who go out into the world to witness to him. That's why we give to the local church. It's the one thing Jesus is building. Nothing else matters as far as he's concerned. Everything else will pass away, but his church will remain forever. That's why he's in the middle of his church. But now, this one like the Son of Man is what captures him. So the lampstands are just saying that's where Jesus is found. It's not about the lampstands, but that's where he's found. Now we're going to look at the Son of Man. And I looked and I saw one like the Son of Man. That phrase is a phrase that Jesus calls himself throughout the Gospels often. That phrase is the phrase from the great vision in the book of Daniel, chapter 7. For John, he would have been well versed in Daniel 7. And the churches that he taught, these 7 churches, would have been well versed in the book of Daniel. Daniel is one of the prophets that is referenced so much in the New Testament because he speaks of the coming Messiah. Listen to what happens in Daniel chapter 7. This is going back to Daniel now. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a Son of Man. And he came to the Ancient of Days, that's God, and was presented before him. And to him, this one like the Son of Man, was given dominion and glory and a kingdom that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. And it ties up with the prophet Isaiah, and it ties up with the prophet Jeremiah, and it is proven in the coming of Jesus, one like the Son of Man, born in the flesh, God as a man. Not 50-50. The fullness of the deity was pleased to dwell in this man born in Bethlehem. The fullness of God. The fullness of the Spirit without measure came upon him. But he was one like the Son of Man. That's how he came. Looked like us, spoke like us, lived like us, just better than us, because he wasn't led by his flesh. He was led by the Spirit of God that was within him. John sees, and he remembers Daniel. I see one like the Son of Man. He's looking at Jesus. This is the same person that he'd lived with in Palestine some 60 years before. This is who he sees. This is the same one he'd leant his head upon at the Last Supper as they ate together. But now, when he looks, he sees him so differently. Because now he's about to see him in his glory. And he's wearing a robe, a long robe, not a short robe. He wasn't running around. He was now in his high priestly robe and his kingly robe, with a golden sash around his chest. In those days, when you wore a belt or a sash around your waist, it was when you were working. When you wore a belt or a sash around your chest as a priest or king, it was when you were resting, because his work was finished. He had come, he had lived, he had died, he had done everything he needed to do, and he was risen, and he was finished his work. He was complete, and his work was complete. And the hairs of his head were white, like white wool, like snow. And his eyes were like a flame of fire. And his feet were like burnished bronze. And his voice was like the roar of many waters. I just want you to think for a moment. Can you imagine seeing this and then trying to explain it to somebody else? This poor guy, John. I don't know how to explain what I've just seen. How do I give you an image of the power and the glory of what I've just seen? That's why I use the word like. It was like wool. It was like snow. It was like the sound of rushing water. It was like flames of fire, because he just can't put it, he can't express it. You're like speechless when you've seen God. But he's got to try. And he does his best to describe this encounter with human language and symbolism, but he cannot do it justice. So white like wool. Why does he see Jesus, the Son of Man, with hair white like wool? White as snow. Well, John knows the Bible well. He knows the book of Daniel. He knows very well that those words are the same words used by Daniel in that prophecy around the Son of Man to describe the Ancient of Days. So what he's saying here is, he's saying, you know God, whom Daniel saw, the Ancient of Days, whom the Son of Man appeared to. Well, right now, as I look at the Son of Man, he's exactly like the Ancient of Days. He is the Ancient of Days. He is God, whose hair is white like wool, like snow. It's from the book of Daniel. That's the connection. And his eyes were like flames of fire. What a picture. His eyes were like flames of fire. I'll tell you something about a fire, which we all know. A fire dances. A fire is alive. It's not stagnant. It's moving the whole time. These eyes were like flames of fire. They were so alive. And they were so warm like fire. And they were so hot like fire. And they were so intense like fire. I saw eyes like flames of fire. You know what fire does? Fire purifies. Fire, it gets rid of the nonsense. It burns. Fire is intense. But it's like John saying, when I looked into these eyes, they were like dancing and alive, and the fiery flames of them just made me clean. They just purify me. You see, the thing about the eyes of Jesus is though they are so intense and so burning, it's like when he looks at you, he just makes you clean. He just purifies you, because he so loves the world. He so loves mankind that those who get to look into those eyes are cleansed by the fire, purified by the fire. And they are warmed by the fiery love. You know, his love is so intense. His love is like an inextinguishable fire. And you let this fiery love wash over you and cleanse you and purify you, and your heart and your soul and your spirit man gets loved to full capacity by the fire in his eyes. There is nothing dead or cold in his eyes. He is on fire in love with us. And John gets to look into his eyes. These eyes, they don't just look at you, they also look through you. They can see right through everything. They see right through pretense, pride. They see right through things you're hiding away. You cannot hide from his love. They look right through. So it's best, let me say this, it's best to just acknowledge that you're a sinner. It's best to acknowledge that you need him and receive the purifying warmth of his love and be saved by grace through faith. And then his feet were like burnished bronze when it has been caused to glow in a furnace. Why burnished bronze? What's the picture? We're starting to get it. The book of Daniel. In the prophecies, in Daniel, a vision is given to Nebuchadnezzar, who was the king of Babylon at that time. And all the human kingdoms that he saw in this vision were these massive monstrosities, these giants, but they all had certain types of feet. And some of them were like clay feet. And some of them were a mixture of iron and clay. But it didn't matter. Every single one of these human kingdoms that Daniel, that in the book of Daniel are prophesied by God, spoken of, every single one of these feet cannot carry the weight of the empire. They are fragile and they are frail, which means that every worldly empire will collapse. And then it comes to one kingdom that can never be shaken. And it says that kingdom, its feet were bronze that had been tested in the fire. In other words, there's one kingdom that will never ever fail. And it's the kingdom of our God and of his Son, Jesus Christ. And so this is now, as John looks, he's seeing these are the feet that will never fail. These are the feet that have been burned in the fire, tested, and will never ever fail. This is the kingdom of God that I am looking at. And his voice was like the sound of many waters. Have you ever walked in the mountains and come to a river? And this river is running. And it's amazing because this river produces a sound that is so loud. And sometimes where there's a bit of a waterfall, where there's a bit of a water flow, you can hardly hear each other speak because of the sound. But I want to say, at the same time that river is so powerful and loud, drowning out the nonsense voices, it's also peaceful. The sound of rushing waters. The loud sound of rushing waters. The voice of God. The voice of God silences the nonsense, but at the same time brings this incredible peace when you hear the voice of God. And he heard it. And then he goes on to say the following. In his right hand he held 7 stars. From his mouth came a sharp 2-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining in full strength. In his right hand he held 7 stars. From his mouth came a sharp double-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining in full strength. I quickly want to read this next verse, although I'm not going to preach on it, because we'll go to it next time, because you'll see the explanation. Write therefore the things that you have seen, those that are and those that are to take place after this. As for the mystery of the 7 stars that you saw in my right hand, and the 7 golden lampstands, the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. So Jesus says that to him about it. Just so you know, the 7 stars are the angels or the messengers to the 7 churches, and the lampstands are the 7 churches. So now, let's end off with this last verse. Revelations 1 verse 16. And in his right hand he held 7 stars. First of all, why stars? I think Jesus is saying something more through this picture of him holding the stars. Because you've got to think about the day and age in which John was writing this. Do you know that in this day and age, they only knew of 7 planets? And so it's obvious, like he's going to picture the 7 stars. And you're going to hear a little bit more about it right now. The Roman emperors understood this. And so the Roman emperors like Domitius and Nero and all of them, around their thrones, they would have the 7 stars or the 7 planets. They would have pictures around it because it was to say like, we are enthroned in the galaxy. This is as big as the galaxy as we know, and we have it. In Greek religion, the goddess, and I don't know how to say her name, Hecate, held the stars. She held them. And she called herself the beginning and the end in Greek mythology. Now, the 7 stars are not in a goddess's hand. The 7 stars are not around the throne of Domitius. The 7 stars are in the right hand of Jesus. It was thought that the stars controlled everything. Astrology, astronomy, we look to the stars to find out our bearings, to find out everything. Now Jesus says, I got the stars in my hand. I hold the stars. The stars don't determine your reality. I, the Son of God, like the Son of Man do. I am the same as. I am in the Ancient of Days. I am one and the same. The Son of Man, the Lord, controls the cosmos. The universe is held together by him and for him, Paul writes in Colossians chapter 1. If it wasn't for him holding this whole thing together, it would just fall apart, literally. And a time is coming when he will say, fall apart. He lets go, and then he recreates and makes all things new. And the word that proceeds from the mouth of the Son of Man was like a sharp, two-edged sword. In other words, it cuts through the mumbo-jumbo. It cuts through all the nonsense culture that man creates. You know what the content creators say, what the social commentators say, what the political commentators say, what the atheist says, what the agnostic says, what your cousin says. The sword of Jesus, the sword of the Spirit, cuts right through because truth is truth and it can't be changed. You can bury truth and you can hide truth, but you cannot destroy truth. Truth is truth. And Jesus is, he said, I am the truth. I am the way. I am the life. And Paul saw the sword of the Spirit coming from his mouth. And then lastly, and his face. And his face. You know, in the Old Covenant, in the Old Testament, it was said, no man shall see my face. For whoever sees my face will surely die. Because you and I have no comprehension of the glory and majesty of God. But then God would always work with the people, and he'd work with Abraham, and he'd work with Moses, and he'd work with Isaac and Jacob. And at times, like with Moses, he would say, come up here, only you. Joshua must stay down there. He must come up halfway, but he must stay there. Only you come here, and I'm going to show you my face. And it was a very rare occasion when you saw the face of God. And one of the great wonders, or one of the most beautiful things you could ever have was to say, and the Lord's face shine upon you. By that great blessing. The Lord's face look upon you with favor. And now John stands there, and he looks straight into the face of God. And I heard a voice, and I turned to see the voice, and I saw this face shining. Can you imagine him trying to explain what this face looked like? I saw this face. It was like the sun shining in full strength. Have you ever tried? Please don't. To look at the sun at midday. Just look, open your eyes and go. I mean, we are so many. How far away are we from the sun? And you can't even look at it. John's saying, I looked, and it was so powerful and intense and bright. It was like the sun shining at full day, except I wasn't harmed. Except I wasn't destroyed. He had the face of God, the full face of God, shining upon him. It's no wonder the next verse says, and I fell at his feet as though dead. Literally. And then he says, I felt his right hand touching me. I end off with this. The risen and exalted Lord turns all his purity and love towards his people. His fire, the fire in his eyes, the sword of his mouth, not to crush us, but to free us, so that we too may shine with his light. It's all about us, in a sense, receiving the glow of who he is, carrying the glow of who he is. Like Naaman was at that little coffee shop on that Saturday night in the middle of the Berg with Tangent doing her thing and everybody doing their thing, and suddenly the glow of the kingdom of heaven comes. We shine because he is in us. The Son, one like the Son of Man, has come to live inside of you if you're a follower of Christ. One like the Son of Man is in you, the hope of glory in us, so we can shine when we go out there. Awaken yourself, church, to the reality of who is inside of you. Complacency is your enemy, not persecution. But one day, every knee will bow and every tongue confess that he is Lord. So choose today whether you want to do it when you've got no choice later, or do it now while you choose. The choice is yours. For he welcomes everyone who humbles himself and says, I'm sorry. If you are who you are, I surrender. I will worship you. Because like I said, all mankind are incurably religious. Who will you